Hi, and welcome back to Glassbox Writing Automated Unit Tests. Today we're going to look at what a unit test is and what it means to write a unit test, how to write a unit test, and when you should consider writing unit tests. So let's begin by first discussing what is a unit test. So far we've been looking at a lot of automated testing solutions, particularly front-end driven tests, using stuff like WebDriver, RSpec, and so on. Unit tests are tests which are typically written as you're developing an application of some sort, whether that's a web application or an applet or a desktop application, whatever. Unit tests are basically known as low-level tests, tests which are written to test very specific parts of an application, at times ignoring everything else. And the focus of these unit tests is that these tests are supposed to be small, not necessarily quick to write, but are usually quick in execution and give you quick results. So to get this series up and running, what I've done is, if I go to my Eclipse, I have a really basic application which I have begun working on. At the moment, it doesn't do anything, not really. It has a couple of packages where each package has some specific thing in it, and the purpose of this project is to eventually have some kind of virtual pet simulator where when you run this application you have some kind of pet. By definition of pet, what I mean is some kind of animal, and the animal would require input from the user to take care of its needs, such as feeding it, putting it to sleep. Whenever you feed it or whenever you put it to sleep, the application on the back end is going to save some information somewhere and do some stuff. So if you were to say close this application and reopen it, anything you do, the information in it won't be lost. We don't really need to care what this application really does. That's not important. What we need to think about is writing unit tests so we can run these tests as we're developing our application to make sure we haven't broken anything. So at the moment, this application is relatively very small. It doesn't do anything. There isn't an application kind of run me class. There's nothing to actually show for it. But we do have classes which we've begun kind of templating for the moment. And what we need to do is start thinking about writing tests for these templates so we know that the templates themselves work. So for instance, let's just say we decide to, I don't know, change this getName method for some reason or another. And let's just say we write a test specifically testing this getName. If we were to change the functionality of this, we don't know what kind of impact that might have on the entire application. However, if we wrote a test for it and just run the test, assuming if the test passes, that means the application still behaves the way it should behave. If the test fails, then we know our application now behaves slightly differently. So the purpose of writing unit test is that it gives us confidence that our application still works in the required manner, and it also still behaves the way it should behave. So what we're going to do for this video is to write a really basic test just to make sure that things are working in a very specific way. So for the moment, we're not going to focus on this application package or this manager package. We're only going to focus on this animal package. And we're going to focus at a very specific area, i.e. this area here, the ability to get the name of an animal object that we set. So the question is, how do we write a test for this? Well, it's actually quite straightforward. What we can do is we can right click on source, click new, and just click a class. And let's give this a relatively distinct name in that it actually makes sense and it gives us information on what it's trying to test. One of the important things about writing unit tests is in a unit test class, you can have various tests which do various different things. but the class name should reflect what area of the code you are testing, which could be very different to writing, say, high-level tests, such as WebDriver tests, where when you write a class, or rather when you create a class, your test could be more geared towards testing particular functionality or particular areas of a page. Unit tests are supposed to be a little bit more specific. So let's name this class something meaningful. Let's give it the name Animal Object Service Test. So to me, what this means is this test class will contain tests which are relevant to the animal object, and it is a service test in that these classes are effectively going to be providing in service to our application or to our manager package. So for the moment, to me, it makes sense to call them service test. Going forward, I might change the name of the test, but for the moment, let's just leave it at this. Let's also go ahead and put it in a different package. So for the moment, it's going to go in default. I don't want to do that. I'm going to put it in the test package. So it's a package that doesn't actually exist at the moment. So let's go ahead and finish. Okay. So it's created a brand new package and a brand new class. So inside this, I am now going to write a really simple test. The test I'm going to write is, well, we said that we want to create an animal and give it a name, and then just get the name and check that the name we gave it is the same as what it is returning. So again, straightforward. What we will want to do is something like, let's annotate it first, and we're going to say something like public void should create animal and return name. So what is needed to create this animal? So we know it's in a package, and the package is public, in that the class itself is public, so we've got access to the class, I suppose. So we shouldn't really have any issues just trying to create a direct instance of this. But at the same time, we can see that we have another class, cat, which extends animal. So maybe we can write a test using a little bit of polymorphism in here as well to try and test two classes in one go. So we can say animal, and let's just call it animal, is equal to new cat. Okay. If we have a look at the constructors, we know that the constructors have to be passed a string variable, and the string variable in this case is a name, so we can pass it a name. We can also see that there aren't any other constructors. So in Java, just a little bit of background in how constructors are kind of generated. If we don't define a constructor for any given class, a default constructor is kind of given, but it's hidden in the background whether you provide one or not. And the constructor doesn't really take any arguments. But the second you provide a constructor, that default constructor goes away, and whatever constructors you've written are the ones which are used. So in this instance, we've only got a constructor which takes the name, and then cat extends animal, and all it's doing is just calling the super in this case. In other words, it's calling animal's constructor. So we can say here, let's give it a name. So before giving it a name, let's declare a name of some kind. So let's just say string name is equal to kitty. Why not? And let's also be a little bit more descriptive. So I'm going to say given I have a string named kitty, when I create an animal and pass in the constructor a name. So let's go ahead and import these classes also. Then I can do an assert. And in this assert, I'm gonna say animal dot get name equals name. So the assert is pretty simple, really. I'm just getting the name of this animal, and I'm making sure the animal name that is returned is the same as the value for the name in this test. I obviously also need to import in the test. Okay, so what we can do now is let's right click, run, and see what happens. Okay, so it's basically run a test, and it's also run our test, and it took 10 milliseconds, which is another way of saying next to nothing. So this is a really quick test that ran and is simply telling us that the get name definitely returns expected result. So one might say, hold on, what's the purpose of this video? I mean, this is kind of self-explanatory. It's not really something that needs an entire video really for. The focus of unit test is to give us quick confidence that we haven't broken anything. So let me explain that in a different way. Let's go back to string get name, and now let's do this. By doing this, so let's go ahead and save. The application in itself hasn't really broken. We've just added in one small bit of code. We haven't changed our test at all. The focus of unit test is that once you write a test and it passes, we really shouldn't change the test. We can take different approaches when we write tests, obviously. We can write them using a TDD or a BDD fashion. Let's not get into that for the moment. Let's keep that for a future video. But let's just say we've changed how this get name works. Now, before say we push this code to some kind of repository, or let's just say before we push this code to, I don't know, production or something, if we simply go back and right click and rerun our test, we can now see that our test fails. And even better, it didn't take a long amount of time for it to tell us that. It told us that your application is now not working the way it should be working instantly. By clicking on that, it tells us exactly what the failure is, and is saying that this now behaves slightly differently to the way it should behave when you wrote the test. So if you now go back to wherever this is, and if you then somehow diagnose what the issue is, so in this case we know it's this, just remove it, rerun the test, everything now passes. So the focus of unit test is to write tests to quickly test your entire applications in its entirety on a unit level and not on a full-scale end-to-end level, to just give you the confidence that your application is still working the way it should be working. And that's it for this video, folks. Thanks for watching. Hi guys, I really appreciate you watching my videos, and if you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you already haven't, hit the subscribe button below. Also, follow me on Twitter, Facebook and Google. Links in the description below. Until next time, ciao.